everyone. Welcome to ILTV's Elections Arena. I'm Aaron Porras. And today in the ring for our New Year's Eve 2020 edition, we'll be covering the good, the bad, and the ugly of the past few years. The Netanyahu indictments, Israeli relations with the West, and of course, the future of the Israeli left and right. Joining us to discuss today is the founder of the Front for the Protection of Democracy, Uri Zaki. And on the other side, we have Ruti Bloom, journalist and columnist for the Jerusalem Post and the Jewish News Syndicate. Thank you both so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get right into it. So, Netanyahu has now officially reportedly filed his request for Knesset immunity from the allegations against him. And in his official request, which is not yet confirmed, he said that he's arranged that trying him now would compromise the will of the electorate, and more importantly, harm the Knesset. All right, so keeping Netanyahu's words in mind, Uri, I'd actually like to start with you today. Is immunity the cornerstone of a functioning democracy?
It's a cornerstone for parliamentarian conduct, but it's not related to what Netanyahu is asking. The immunity was made for members of Knesset, usually in the minority or independents, to refrain from having pressure by the government and so on and so forth. That's immunity, and it is true that...
But those pressures can't equally be applied to somebody in Netanyahu's position or someone in the majority?
Netanyahu is the prime minister. He's indicted for not acts that are related to his position as a member of Knesset, but rather as an abuse, if anything, of his position to receive bribe, to influence the media, to receive hundreds of thousands of shekels worth of champagne and cigars and so on and so forth.
Well, and again, without getting into the specifics of the allegations, speaking purely on the concept of Knesset immunity, even Rivlin, now President Rivlin, has stated that without this immunity, people can make up charges and go after elected officials, as they have done even in Israel in the past.
Again, I heard what President Rivlin, or then member of Knesset Rivlin, said. He was relating to something completely different than what Netanyahu is facing right now. And you know what? I think that Netanyahu, he said that there's nothing in those allegations. How come he's so afraid of a trial?
All right, well, Ruti?
Immunity doesn't prevent him from undergoing the legal process after he finishes being prime minister. The idea is that as long as he's prime minister, and if he, in the next election, gets a majority or is able to form a coalition, the question was whether he's allowed to under our legal system. And the reason that there's a question is that this is unprecedented. Having said that, he has voters, all the voters who voted for him knew what the charges were and that he would possibly be under indictment. Even they knew it. And those of us who support Netanyahu consider those charges to be completely trumped up. And in any case, even if the point is, I would say, okay, good. So let him go through the legal process if that's what has to happen. But it doesn't have to happen now. It should happen when he's finished being prime minister.
So what is it about Netanyahu's electorate, or rather, what is it about Netanyahu that draws people to him so quickly?
Okay, well,
closely?
there's a really simple answer for that. Netanyahu has been one of Israel's, if not the greatest leader, certainly one of Israel's greatest leaders. You know, he has done so much for the country. He also is extremely flawed, as are all leaders, and especially great leaders. He has many flaws, but he has done so much for the country, and the people who support him believe that he is the best person to go to war and to achieve peace, to make the economy boom and everything else. So that's why he is someone who has a proven record, and the left hates him because the left hates his record.
Well, so speaking of, Uri, I see you smiling here. I think you disagree.
Yeah.
But even you have to agree that Netanyahu, for better or worse, for all of his flaws, has done great things for the country, no?
Not really. I think Netanyahu wasted a whole decade in office. I think if you want to point, if you think about Ben Gurion, of course, if you really want to think about great leaders, you think about Ben Gurion, you think about the establishment of the State of Israel, the IDF, whatever, you name it. You think about Begin, the founder of the Likud party, Netanyahu's party. You can think about the peace with Egypt. You can think about taking the Mizrahi Jews from a lower standard of the Israeli society into the heart of the Israeli society, and so on and so forth. if you think about Netanyahu, there's no big thing, something you can point to say, Netanyahu did this. I mean, he presided over the country, it's true. I mean, but there's nothing remarkable that he has done. But what he is remembered for...
Why is he the longest serving prime minister?
First of all, because he's a true conservative, and it's easier to survive applying conservative policy, because then you don't rock the boat so much. Begin, Sharon, all of those people did big things. Of course, Rabin, who was assassinated for it, it shocks the boat, and then politically you might lose your majority.
It's interesting that Uri brought up two leaders, Ben-Gurion and Begin. First of all, Ben-Gurion was a great leader, there's no question about it. But alongside that, he did many things that today I would consider completely unacceptable. He forced Israelis to join unions, and if they didn't join the Histadrut, they couldn't get work.
It's not Ben-Gurion himself, come on.
Well, and Begin, may I say, when Begin was prime minister and before he rose to power. People like Uri Zaki, I can't speak for you specifically, okay, but people on your side called him Mussolini. They said he was evil and disgusting. Now, there's nostalgia for Begin. And why? Because Begin had no money, and he dressed simply, and he lived modestly, and,
It's not because of that.
It's
because he respected the rule of law in Israel. And by the way, I was a member of the Likud party. I wasn't only
during Begin's time, yeah.
Yeah, this was Shamir's time, and even Netanyahu. But I think that Begin was, on the one hand, an Israeli patriot, even a nationalist, but also a true Democrat. And unfortunately, the last 4 years, for most of his years, Netanyahu also respected democracy. In the last 4 years, he evolved into a populist and authoritarian, and that's how he will be remembered.
Unfortunately, we have to move on to the next topic, but don't worry, we can come back to things like this. So another major concern as we move into the third election cycle now is how Israel-U.S. relations have actually changed over the last two administrations, Obama and Trump. And this is especially a hot topic today with both Netanyahu and Trump's time in office at risk. So, Ruti, are voters shifting in some way, from a policy perspective? How are things changing with Israel-U.S. relations, and who will be best to represent Israel with that?
Well, look, first of all, they've changed drastically in the last 3 years, because under 8 years of Obama, who was extremely critical of Israel, to 3 years under Trump, who is extremely philo Israel. He's done one thing after another to bolster support for Israel, has never questioned Israel's right to do anything that involves the military, whether in Gaza or in Syria. It's not just that he moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, but he's done many things.
So what about the arguments that many have had saying that, maybe a critical hand is necessary? Maybe Trump is too enabling.
I would totally disagree with that, because I think that Israel really is a moral example in the Middle East, and I think that any U.S. president should recognize that. So I don't feel that way.
Uli, how do you feel about Trump's presidency towards Israel versus Obama's?
First of all, it creates a really scary gap, I would say, dangerous gap between Israeli Jews and American Jews. And that gap we can't afford. And in a situation where...
You think Trump is the reason for that gap?
Well, the way American Jews regard Trump, and I can even generalize here, because we talk about some 80% of American Jews who see Trump as the worst leader they could ever think of, who want to, they're in the... on the front of the battle against him. Yes, that creates a dangerous gap. By the way, a gap that Netanyahu contributed to since Obama's time, when he so much opposed Obama. So first of all, that's a strategic threat on the state of Israel, because one of our key strategic elements is our alliance with the United States, that is based, at the end of the day, past Trump and all that, something that will be stable on our connections with the American Jewry. Second, And I, of course, agree with the statement you made about Trump being, not an even broker, far from it, with regard to our conflict with the Palestinians, with the continuation of the occupation. This is the real existential threat on the state of Israel.
So what policy of Trump's do you disagree with when it comes to the Palestinian issue? Was it, the recognition of Jerusalem? Was it the Golan? Was it the settlement?
The settlement. I think the settlement issue is the most pressing one. The fact that his administration hinted that it's okay to annex territories in the West Bank is very dangerous from an Israeli Zionist point of view, because once the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, become part of the state of Israel,
the official
that means
of the
the
United
death
States
of Israel.
Is that the settlements are not de facto illegal. Not that he's necessarily endorsing the
Netanyahu read it like that.
Netanyahu
read it like that, and it's easy to read it like that. Trump gave up on any relation with the Palestinians. But let me finish my statement. This is a threat on the mere existence of Israel, either as a democracy or as a Jewish state. These two elements are a must for the Zionist vision.
First of all, it's true what you say about American Jews, but American Jews always vote Democrat. If it weren't Trump and it were a different Republican, we'd have the same situation. Jews in America vote Democrat. As a matter of fact, Trump, the difference with Trump is that he has, let's say, garnered the vote of the Orthodox Jews in America, something that's quite unusual, but Jews vote Democrat, first of all. The wedge that was created, if there is a wedge, you say, the issue of Israel has become bipartisan in the United States. And that is a bad thing, but this is not the fault.
Partisan, you mean?
Excuse me, has become partisan. Okay. Is not bipartisan anymore. But that started to happen after 1967. This has nothing whatsoever to do with Trump. Trump's election reflects a split in America. It's not that it is causing it. And the same thing with Netanyahu. Realities on the ground, including with the Palestinians, are what caused Israelis to become more conservative, has made the peace camp, the so-called peace camp, smaller because of Palestinian behavior. The same thing goes for the right wing in America. It isn't Jews who make a difference in that, it's evangelical Christians, for one thing, who are in far greater numbers in the United States than Jews. Jews make up 2% of the population in the United States, and that's not all voters, because some of those Jews are not even voting age yet, So,
So, from Israel's perspective, Netanyahu has campaigned quite often on his relationship with the United States as being a plus for him. Is there, first of all, would you care to analyze that and maybe address that? And second of all, is there another campaigner out there like Gantz or Lapid who would maybe be better in your eyes?
I'm sure that any other prime minister will be better than Netanyahu right now. Even from the mere fact that Netanyahu is indicted, as we discussed earlier, and I think is a very divisive prime minister, much like President Trump. I do think that someone like Gantz, who maybe is not as eloquent and fluent in English as Netanyahu, who has American education, but is a former chief of staff, well respected, spent some time in Washington as the military attaché for the Israeli embassy, knows the culture in DC and in the United States. I think once Israel would elect a different leader, that leader would be successful in the United States, no doubt about it.
Well, here it's interesting. I do agree with you about this one point. Trump actually recently said, after the April election, or it was the September, now I can't remember which one, when it wasn't clear, when it seemed that Netanyahu wasn't going to be able to form the coalition the first time, Trump was asked by reporters on the tarmac of an airport, have you spoken to Netanyahu? What do you think? And he said, no, and I support the state of Israel. Basically, he was saying, it's not Netanyahu, it's Israel. Now, that's a good thing, because whether Netanyahu, even if you forget about indictments, not indictments, if Benny Gantz is the person to form the next government, even I oppose the election of Benny Gantz, but I will immediately shift to the patriotic position that Israel is in jeopardy when it doesn't have as much support as possible from its enemies outside. And I think it's extremely important that Trump said that, because if Benny Gantz does become prime minister, we will see that Trump still supports pro-Israel moves, and that's crucial.
All right, well, finally, fortunately, we have to move to our last topic. All right, finally, for our last topic tonight, let's talk left versus right here in Israel. From the April elections to the September elections, we saw a number of small but significant changes in the Knesset roster. Parties and party leaders came and went, some got stronger and some others got weaker. But in general, how are voters in Israel reacting to the differences?
Look, much like in the last decade, and especially since the first round of 2019, the watershed of the Israeli political arena is Benjamin Netanyahu. And the split is between pro-Netanyahu and anti-Netanyahu. That affects the small parties, the more ideological parties, the satellite parties, because some voters regard the ideological motivation as a kind of a side element to the most important issue, which is either to topple Netanyahu or to help Netanyahu. That affects strongly on the outskirts of the arena, and that's dangerous because for both blocs, if one party doesn't cross the threshold, it means that the other bloc can get a majority.
Oti?
It's not just the pro-Netanyahu or anti-Netanyahu, which of course it is, but it's also Likud. Netanyahu, in Israel, we don't have a two-party system. We have multi-party system. It's a parliamentary democracy. So Netanyahu really isn't the point. It's his Likud party. In other words, he was just challenged within his party, and he won. Sure. But had Gideon Sa'ar, who challenged him, won that primary, we'd still be in the situation where the voters... We don't know that. No, we don't know. We'd still be in a situation where right-wingers would have to decide whether they're voting Likud or to the right of Likud. And left-wing voters today, are they voting Gantz, or are they going to vote more ideologically pure parties? But the issue is right now that because Netanyahu did win the Likud primary, it is a question of Netanyahu or not Netanyahu. But here's the problem with the smaller parties. On the right, for example, it's silly for any right-winger not to vote Likud directly at this point because of this issue with the stalemate of the coalition. It's
so you
silly.
Mean just in order to form a government, it's
because, no, but it's silly for a different reason. If a person votes, let's say the new right party, he knows that Naftali Bennett is not going to be prime minister. If he votes new right, his assumption is that Netanyahu will be prime minister and and the new right will join him. The same goes for the left. If you're voting Meretz or Labor or something, what you're doing really is you're taking votes away from the main party that can... You disagree because you're in a smaller party.
It's a system. It's a system that disagrees.
Of course it is. No, the system disagrees with me, but I'm talking about the fact that we are now having a third election because there's this stalemate.
But it doesn't change the stalemate because what you need is a 61 majority.
Yes.
None of the two big parties, neither blue and white nor Likud, in any scenario, acceptable scenario, are going to get 61. The question is the bloc. Netanyahu, by the way, called it our bloc. So if voters would listen to you and move away to either one of the two, that means it's one of those small parties, I hope in the right or in the left, would fall beneath the threshold, and that means the end of any prospects for either side to end the stalemate. The stalemate is based on the fact that there's no 61 majority. The only one the only reason for a 61 majority is if all parties in the respective sides will cross the threshold.
But one thing I'm not hearing either of you actually touch upon is the reality of a unity government, which, as we know, most Israelis want.
First of all, I'm not sure most Israelis want.
Yeah, that's it.
And second, I think
all the statistics keep popping up around 70% of the public.
It's not true. I mean, unlike in the past, by the way, where you were right, I never saw a public opinion poll in the last months that showed that the assumption was because they voted for stalemate, that means they want a unity government. It's not the case.
So
it's
is
not
that,
the case.
so is the idea of a unity dead?
I think
the second
I think
elections?
that Netanyahu is the obstacle. The fact that not by acts, but the fact that he's indicted is the obstacle because blue and white cannot go to a coalition with
I
him.
actually think that the obstacle is Avigdor Lieberman's Israel Beitenu party, because in the first election in April, not only his party is actually a right-wing party. I mean, ideologically, it's on the right.
Yeah.
Okay, it's anti-religious coercion.
He has sit
it's
in the right,
anti-religious coercion. That's true, but he is a right-winger in other respects. I think you'd agree with me. I mean, or, you know. So, and he was going to join a Netanyahu-led coalition, and he decided not to. And then he began to say, no, I want the two major parties to form national unity government. And they couldn't agree on it. You can blame Bibi, you can blame Gantz. At the moment, that doesn't matter. The issue, though, is that Lieberman changed this. He made it impossible for the public's, let's say, desire to come to fruition, because his voters who voted for Lieberman didn't think Lieberman was going to be prime minister. They thought that Netanyahu was going to be prime minister, and that
not in the second
Lieberman.
round.
But Lieberman's
No, not the second round.
Lieberman
No.
campaigned on pushing for a unity
Exactly.
government.
Right, for a unity government, but that wasn't what the reason that they were voting for him. The second round, the reason he gained seats was because, A, they said, here's a man with principles, because he won't, even for his own career, he's going to, at the expense of his own career, he's going to stand on principle.
But he was clear he's not going to join neither blocks.
Exactly. So he's really the reason, the technical block for this.
Are you blaming him, or just kind of?
I blame him.
You
Second
blame
of all, the public at a certain moment was saying, okay, just form a national unity government. We need a government already.
Sure.
Okay, that was one, but nobody really wanted it ideologically.
Right.
And what do those two blocks have in common? Very little on the key issues. The key issues of things like the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the settlements, the economy. There are many issues. So even if they did, it wouldn't last.
Well, we're gonna have a lot more time to discuss all these issues ahead of the next third election, landmark elections in March.
Let's hope there's no fourth.
Let's hope that there's no fourth. I think we can all agree right there. But unfortunately, that is all the time that we have in the elections arena today. I'd like to thank our guests, Ruti Blum and Uri Zaki, for joining us again. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Also, remember that for more news from ILTV, please follow us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube. I'm Aaron Porras. Happy New Year, and see you next time.